Champion Vakras had never tasted failure. In 17 years of sanctioned combat, across 347 official matches, not a single opponent had ever landed a meaningful strike on him. His hide was unmarked, his pride unshaken, his legend unquestioned. Among the Galactic Combat Federation he was a living monument, faster than Kelvin Predators, stronger than Thorian Bulls, and unmatched in formal technique. His reputation filled arenas long before he arrived. So when Lieutenant Jade Erickson, a human scarcely reaching 1.7 meters, stepped into the ring opposite his towering 2.4-meter frame, the crowd already knew the outcome. Odds predicted she would last no more than 47 seconds before being flattened. Her light armor and simple stance seemed laughably insufficient compared to Vakras's heavy musculature and plated skin. Spectators murmured eagerly, anticipating a short but spectacular display of dominance. Vakras regarded her with detached confidence. "Human," he said, voice resonating through translator nodes. "You should forfeit now. I am undefeated. I have never been struck. Do not embarrass yourself." Jade stared up at him, utterly composed, her expression unreadable. "You've never been touched in sport combat," she replied evenly. "There's a difference." "Combat is combat," Vakras snorted. "No," she said quietly. "Combat is survival. Sport is entertainment. You have been performing. I have been fighting." The referee, a neutral Velkin, stepped between them and raised a clawed hand. "Standard Federation rules apply. Contact begins on my signal. Fighters ready." Vakras adopted the iconic Thorian stance. Knees bent, upper arms raised, secondary limbs positioned to counter or trap. Every angle perfect. Every movement refined through decades of training. Jade simply stood there, feet shoulder-width apart, arms relaxed at her sides. "Unusual strategy," Vakras commented. "Or perhaps you've frozen in fear." "I'm waiting," Jade said calmly, "for you to stop talking and start fighting." The referee activated the combat field. "Begin." What followed would be dissected frame by frame for decades. Vakras launched forward with a strike powerful enough to crumple alloy plating. He never completed it. Strike 1. Jade redirected his wrist with an open palm. Strike 2. Her elbow drove into his ribs. Strike 3. A knee collapsed his center. Strike 4. The back of her fist clipped his temple. Strike 5. A hammer fist dropped him to his knees. Total time, 1.3 seconds. The arena fell silent. Vakras knelt on the mat, disoriented. He had felt impacts, sharp, precise, devastating, but his brain refused to assemble them into a sequence. One moment he'd been initiating an attack, the next he was kneeling with pain radiating from 5 separate points. His nervous system lagged behind reality. "What happened?" he managed, eyes unfocused. "I hit you 5 times, Jade answered, still standing exactly where she had been at the start. "But you were too busy maintaining perfect form to notice." The referee examined his combat scanner, antennae twitching. Confirmed, 5 full-power strikes from Lieutenant Erickson. Minimal structural damage but significant neural disruption. "Champion Vakras, do you wish to continue?" Vakras forced himself upright, pride burning hotter than the pain. "I was unprepared. I will not underestimate you again." "That's your mistake," Jade said. "You think I want you prepared. I want you vulnerable." With a roar, Vakras charged again, this time abandoning theatrics and focusing entirely on offense. No flourish. No showmanship. Only raw power and genuine intent. It made no difference. 7 strikes landed before his primary blow completed its arc. Jade moved like water, slipping between his limbs, striking angles unfamiliar to any Federation athlete. She targeted anatomical weaknesses that sport competitions avoided for fairness and safety. Nerve clusters, tendon anchors, sensory points. Vakras crashed to the mat harder than before, gasping. "You don't fight," he wheezed. "You attack. There is no honor in this." "You're correct," Jade said, her voice finally showing emotion, cold, sharp, dangerous. "I do not fight. I neutralize threats as efficiently as possible. Honor is for warriors who have the luxury of time. I don't." She paced slowly around him, voice steady. "Every technique I use has one purpose: stop someone from hurting me or others as quickly as physically possible. You've spent 17 years perfecting a sport. I've spent 12 surviving situations where losing meant death." Vakras tried to stand, but his legs trembled uncontrollably. How are you this fast?" "I'm not faster," Jade said. "In fact, my reaction time is slower than yours by 30 milliseconds. But I don't react. I act. You wait to see what your opponent does. I decide what I'm going to do before the match begins and execute instantly. The crowd still hadn't breathed. The referee stepped forward, consulting his diagnostics. Champion Vakras is unable to continue. Victory goes to Lieutenant Eriksson, technical knockout. The arena erupted not with cheers, but with stunned, echoing disbelief. Vakras had not landed a single blow. The undefeated Titan, untouched in over a decade, had been dismantled in seconds by a much smaller human soldier. Jade stepped closer and extended her hand. Vakras stared at it, then at her, then reluctantly accepted the gesture. She pulled him to his feet with surprising steadiness. "You are an incredible athlete," she told him plainly. "The best I've ever seen in formal combat. But you asked me to fight. That's different." Vakras steadied his stance, still struggling to process the defeat. "Explain." Jade folded her arms. "Athletes train to win. Soldiers train to survive. You compete for glory, recognition, crowd approval. I fight because not fighting means people die, including me." Vakras listened, chest still heaving. "You learn to score points," she continued. "I learned to end fights before they begin. You practiced for judges. I practiced for the moments when judges don't exist." She looked around the arena, sweeping across the faces of shocked spectators. Humans have been at war with something, nature, predators, each other, entire environments, for millions of years. We didn't evolve for fair contests. We evolved to deal with threats. Vakras blinked, the truth settling into him uncomfortably. "You were never struck," Jade said, "because no one you fought ever intended to hurt you. They intended to win. There's a difference. I wasn't aiming to score. I aimed to end the engagement before you had time to register it." Vakras swallowed. "But I trained my whole life. And I respect that," Jade said sincerely. "Your skill is exceptional. But your world and my world shaped us differently. You learned combat as art. I learned it as necessity." Vakras finally exhaled and stared at the smaller human who had toppled him with ease. "We should train together," he said quietly. "I want to understand what you do." Jade shook her head gently. "You should teach sport combat. You're brilliant at it. I should teach survival combat. They're different skills, both valuable. But don't confuse them." The crowd continued to stare, trying to reconcile myth with reality. Jade turned toward the exit, steps light and unhurried. Before leaving, she paused and looked over her shoulder at the defeated champion. "Oh, and if it helps," she said, "you can tell people someone finally hit you. 5 times. In 1 second. Nothing shameful about that. That's just reality catching up to sport." Vakras stood motionless as she walked away. Each word she left behind echoed louder than the blows she delivered. For the first time in his career he felt something unfamiliar, not humiliation but clarity. A realization that the world he had mastered was not the same world she had survived. His coach approached hesitantly. "Champion, are you injured?" "Not physically," Vakras answered slowly. He touched the side of his head where her fist had struck. "But I have been awakened." The arena lights dimmed as the audience dispersed in murmurs. Commentators whispered, analysts replayed the slow-motion footage, and fans tried to understand how a perfect record could collapse so quickly. Meanwhile, Vakras stared at the entrance Jade had disappeared through. 17 years, he muttered. 17 years without being struck. And she did it without effort. His coach nodded. "What will you do now?" Vakras considered the question. 4 years he had lived inside a polished arena governed by rules, boundaries, and judges. But Jade came from a world without such luxuries, a world where hesitation meant death. "I must learn," Vakras finally said. "Not how to win, but how to survive." He looked down at the mat, remembering her words, "You react. I act." In that moment, the champion understood the difference between strength and survival, between form and intent. Everything he had perfected had been built for a controlled environment. Jade's skills had been built for the opposite. As the arena emptied, Vakras walked toward the same exit she had taken. Not to challenge her again but to understand her world. Because in 1 second, the undefeated champion had learned more than in 300 victories. He had learned why humans were feared in real combat. And for the first time Vakras felt grateful, not for winning but for being defeated by someone who showed him the truth.